My earliest memories were always filled with shouting. My father's voice echoed through our small house, making the walls tremble as if they were about to collapse. My mother always tried to stay calm, probably thinking about me and my younger brother, Caleb, but sometimes she couldn't hold it in. The arguments kept repeating, day after day, like an endless cycle. At that time, I was only 7, and Caleb was just 3. Too young to fully understand what was happening, but I knew. I saw the exhaustion etched on my mother's face every morning as she brushed my hair in front of the mirror. I saw her red-rimmed eyes after every argument, the deep sighs she tried to suppress while putting on a strong front for her children. I still remember that morning vividly when she softly sang an old lullaby while brushing Caleb's hair. I thought it was just another ordinary day, but that was the last time I saw her do that. That afternoon, my father's rage exploded louder than ever before. "Lisa, you always argue with me!" His voice roared, making Caleb flinch and burst into tears. "I just want to live my own life, Andrew," my mother fired back, her voice trembling but firm. "You control everything I do, everyone I talk to. I can't live like this anymore." Her final words echoed in the air, leaving behind a heavy silence that suffocated the entire house. I sat curled up on the staircase, clutching my brother's tiny hand, feeling like my world was about to collapse. After that day, everything changed too quickly. My mother vanished from our lives as if she had never existed. No goodbye, no final hug. My father told me she had abandoned us, that she didn't care about us, that she chose other things, wrong things, over being our mother. I was too young to understand everything, but old enough to feel the sting of betrayal. I believed him. I believed my mother had truly left me, that she no longer needed us. And then Sarah appeared. She was much younger than my mother, always radiant and full of energy. Sarah swiftly stepped into the role of my father's new wife, as if my mother had never been there. Caleb was immediately drawn to her. It didn't take long before he was calling her mom, clinging to her every chance he got. But I couldn't. Every time Sarah tried to brush my hair, I would flinch away. Every time she opened her arms for a hug, I stood still, refusing to respond. My father didn't like that. "Emily, you need to be grateful," he said sternly whenever I acted coldly. "Sarah is trying her best to be your mother. But how could I be grateful when I already had a mother? A real mother somewhere out there. A mother who disappeared without an explanation, without a single attempt to come back." Gradually, the distance between Caleb and me grew. Sarah adored my brother in ways I had never experienced. She bought him the finest clothes, took him to art classes and ice skating lessons. I was invited too, but I always refused. I didn't want to be part of their world. I didn't want to pretend everything was okay. Instead, I buried myself in books. I studied relentlessly because I knew education was my only escape from this house. As the years passed, Caleb became more and more attached to Sarah while I remained on the outside, a stranger in my own family. But I had a plan. I would study hard, earn a scholarship, and leave this place for good. My college years flew by at a dizzying pace. I worked tirelessly to ensure I wouldn't rely on anyone, juggling part-time jobs to support myself. Meanwhile, Caleb lived in the world Sarah had designed for him, a world of lavish parties, expensive clothes, and a carefree lifestyle. Finally, when I turned 18, I made it. I stood at the door of my college dorm, feeling, for the first time in my life, that I could truly breathe. This tiny room was mine. No father watching over my shoulder, no Sarah hovering nearby, no Caleb's curious eyes silently judging my refusal to integrate into their family. I was free. But even though I was far away, I still tried to keep in touch with Caleb. I couldn't abandon my brother, even though an invisible wall had already formed between us. One that neither of us knew how to break. And I never imagined that years later, this fragile connection would become the root of the greatest turmoil in my life. I still remember the first time I asked Caleb about his future plans. "What college are you applying to?" I asked during a short visit home. Caleb barely looked up from his phone, shrugging as if it didn't matter. "I'm not going to college," he said, his tone disturbingly casual. I froze. "Not going? But you always said you wanted to study design." "I don't need to anymore." Caleb chuckled, as if I had said something ridiculous. "Sarah introduced me to Rachel. You remember Rachel, right? She's the only daughter of the Harper family. You know, the investment real estate empire. They're insanely rich, Emily, and Rachel is completely obsessed with me." I didn't know what shocked me more, Caleb completely giving up on his dreams or the way he talked about his life as if it were just part of a predetermined plan. "So, you're going to marry her?" I asked, still unable to believe it. "Yeah, probably," he smirked. "Sarah says it's a smart choice. The Harper family will take care of me for life. What's there to worry about?" "What's there to worry about?" I looked at my brother, the boy who once had big dreams, now only concerned with someone else's wealth as a shortcut to an easy life. "So, you don't want a career of your own? You don't want to build something for yourself?" "Not everyone is like you, Emily." Caleb shrugged and turned back to his phone. "Not everyone wants to work themselves to exhaustion just to survive." I didn't know what to say anymore. Caleb had completely become the person Sarah wanted him to be. Someone who lived off others, seeing life as a series of privileges he was entitled to. Caleb's wedding took place a year later, so extravagant that I felt like a stranger among the wealthy guests I didn't even know. Sarah handled everything, from Rachel's wedding dress to the dinner menu. My father stood there, beaming with pride at the son he had always favored. And me? I was just an outsider in my own family. In the months that followed, I focused on my own life. I landed a remote accounting job with a decent salary, enough to rent a small apartment in the city. I thought I could finally build a life without my family's interference. But Caleb had other ideas. At first, he dropped by occasionally, always bringing stories of his glamorous new life. But soon, those visits started including something else. One day, Caleb showed up at my door with a baby carrier and a large bag. "Emily, can you watch Matthew for a bit? Rachel has a charity gala tonight and I have an important meeting." I blinked at the tiny baby, barely a year old, sleeping soundly in the carrier. "Caleb, you couldn't give me a heads up?" "It's just this once," he said, setting the carrier down and leaving before I could protest. But it wasn't just this once. The visits became more frequent, and soon I had become an unpaid babysitter. Caleb and Rachel always had reasons. An important dinner, an unexpected trip, an event they couldn't miss. And then, one time, Caleb left Matthew with me for 3 days, without any warning. My job started to suffer. Video meetings were constantly interrupted by crying, spreadsheets left unfinished because I had to change diapers. I was exhausted, but Caleb didn't care. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I was working when Matthew fell off a chair while reaching for a toy. He screamed, and when I picked him up, I saw a bruise forming on his small arm. When Caleb came to pick him up, I barely had a chance to explain before he exploded. "What the hell, Emily?" he shouted. "You can't even watch a child properly?" "Caleb, this wasn't my fault. He just had a minor fall." I tried to stay calm. "Not your fault?" His eyes burned with anger. "You're always so busy with your stupid job. You should have been watching him instead of your worthless spreadsheets." I felt my own anger boil over. "I have a job, Caleb. I can't just drop everything to babysit whenever you feel like it." "And you still call yourself my sister?" he spat. "I trusted you with my child, and you let him get hurt." I looked at my brother, the one I had once tried to protect, now standing in front of me, blaming me for not sacrificing my life for him. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice colder than ever. Caleb stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. "Are you serious?" "Completely." I opened the door. "From now on, if you need a babysitter, hire one." Caleb shot me a furious glare, picked up Matthew and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, but no matter what, I knew I had done the right thing. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. I thought that after that, Caleb would understand that I was no longer someone he could order around, but I had overestimated my brother's sense of reasoning. A week later, I received a message from my father. Emily, the whole family is going to Colorado for a ski trip this Christmas. You'll watch Matthew for Caleb during that time. The trip will last a week. No request, no inquiry, just a clear command, as if it was something I was obligated to do. I put my phone down, took a deep breath, and replied, I already have plans to go on vacation with my friends. I can't watch Matthew. The next message came almost immediately. Emily, don't be selfish. This is your family. We put family first. I scoffed. If family is so important, then why didn't anyone ask if I was available before making this decision for me? No response for hours. I thought that was the end of it. But by the evening, Caleb called. You're joking, right? His voice was sharp the moment I answered. Why would I be joking? I asked, keeping my tone calm. You're really not going to watch Matthew? Rachel and I already made plans. We can't take him with us. Then hire a babysitter, I replied. You can more than afford to pay for a professional. Are you just trying to make things difficult for me? Caleb snapped. You're always like this, always thinking you're better than everyone else. But really, you're just a heartless... I hung up before he could finish. Less than 30 minutes later, my father called. I looked at the screen, feeling a headache coming on. I wasn't planning on answering, but then I thought, maybe this was the moment to put an end to everything. I pressed accept. Emily, what do you think you're doing? His voice was firm, but I could hear the frustration in every word. I've already made myself clear, I replied. I'm not watching Matthew. You're disappointing the family. You should be grateful for everything Sarah and I have done for you. We've cared for you your entire life, and now you're turning your back on us? I let out a dry laugh. You cared for me? Or did you just want me to do everything you expected? You should think carefully, Emily, he said, his tone dropping lower. If you continue this way, don't expect anything from this family anymore. I knew exactly what he meant. You mean the inheritance? I asked, my voice turning cold. You're going to leave everything to Caleb, aren't you? Silence. I laughed. Then go ahead, Dad. I don't care. You'll regret this. I won't. I hung up. I sat quietly in my apartment, staring out at the night sky. I used to think that, no matter what, Caleb was still my brother. But now I realized I had no reason to hold on to a relationship that only existed for others' benefit. I was free. 3 days later, I left the city with my friends, heading to a mountain resort. For the first time in years, I felt like I could truly enjoy life without looking back. And then, the message came. Your mother wants to connect with you. The name on my screen made me freeze. Lisa Mitchell. I stared at the notification for a long time, my heart pounding. I hadn't thought about my mother in years. Or rather, I had forced myself not to think about her. I had convinced myself that she no longer existed in my life. But now, she was reaching out. Finally, I tap on the message. Emily, I saw your father's post. I know this may be a shock, but I truly want to talk to you. I've been waiting for this opportunity for so long. If you're willing, please meet me. I didn't know how to respond. I had grown up believing that my mother didn't care about me, that she left without ever looking back. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. I texted back, we can meet. I chose a quiet cafe to meet her. As soon as I walked in, I recognized her instantly. Still the same eyes, still the same petite frame. When she saw me, tears shimmered in her eyes. Emily, she said, her voice trembling. I sat down across from her. I want to know the truth, I said. She nodded. And then she told me everything. My father had done everything in his power to keep her away from us. He sent her pictures of Caleb and me with Sarah, telling her that we had a new family and didn't need her anymore. He even made up stories claiming that Caleb and I didn't want to see her. But the worst part? My mother had never actually abandoned us. All the money I sent you since you turned 18, you never received it? She asked. I shook my head. My father had lied. He kept every penny she had sent me and never told me about it. I felt like I had been deceived my entire life. That night, I made a post on social media. For years, I believed my mother abandoned me. But today, I learned the truth. My father kept her out of my life. He lied to me, kept the money she sent for me, and made me believe she didn't love me. The post exploded. Friends, relatives, even people who had once known my family shared it. I received a message from my father. Emily, you don't understand what's happening. Let me explain. I didn't read it. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Caleb. I didn't know anyone anything anymore. I had found my mother, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I moved into a small apartment not far from my mother's home, a quiet place where I could finally start over. After years of feeling controlled and used, I could finally breathe freely without looking back. In the peaceful evenings, I often visited my mother, helping her prepare dinner or simply sitting by her side, listening to stories about my childhood that I had never known. Each time, I felt a little lighter, as if I were slowly piecing together the memories that had been stolen from me for so many years. One day, while sorting through a few boxes left from my move, my mother suddenly asked, "Do you think you'll ever reach out to Caleb again?" I set my book down and looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know," I sighed. "Maybe one day, if he learns to think for himself. But I'm not holding my breath." She didn't say anything else, just nodded gently. She understood. She knew how much Caleb had been influenced by my father and Sarah, and perhaps, just as I had once been manipulated by their lies, my brother needed to realize the truth for himself. But I no longer wanted to wait or hope for something that even he didn't want to change. Now I had a new life, a life I had chosen for myself. And more importantly, I had found my real family. A family not built on obligation or control, but on love, respect, and truth. Life doesn't always give us a perfect family, but we always have the right to choose the people who truly deserve to be called family. Emily spent her childhood seeking approval from those who only wanted to control her, but in the end, she realized that true family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by honesty and genuine care. Sometimes, in life, we have to walk away from toxic relationships to truly find ourselves, and when we are strong enough to do that, true freedom begins. What do you think about Emily's story? If you were in her position, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more thought-provoking stories about family, life, and the choices that shape us.